in its propaganda, we will lose control sooner or later if there is no proactivity on part of the international community. People will get desperate, and then we will have the mayhem that everybody is afraid of. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. So we have an opportunity right now to prevent conflict and to make this transitional period short and as less bloody as possible. But the idea of somehow the status quo regenerating itself, that the Assad emerged victorious, in my opinion, is a chimera. And the longer we keep sort of talking about it, the more we make this situation of a dissolution of Syria and an implosion in Syria, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I hope the international community will rise up. And I always say it this way, and by way of an emotional plea and closing my statement. Back in 2008, when I made this prediction, and even before when I said that this revolution is going to take place in this way, and it's going to be regional, this is also the other thing that I have said, and no one wanted to believe me, or any of the other activists who made the same prediction. Please don't make that mistake again. We were not talking on the basis of kind of sort of like wishful thinking. We really have lived in Syria for years of our life. We went beyond these bubbles in Damascus and Aleppo, and we went to the different communities that were hard hit by government neglect and nepotism, and we can see the suffering, and we know the majority of the people live there right now in these communities. So for once, give us the credit of being able to tell you about our part of the world. And I'm telling you, the Assad regime has become a mammoth. It's really the dead weight of it is breaking down the country, and we're trying to shake off that dead weight. And this attempt is not going to stop. We need it in order to survive. So this movement, the protest movement, is not going to go anywhere. And the question ahead of us is how we can move from now to a post-Assad period as quickly and as painlessly as possible. Give us credit when you say that. That's all I have to say. I mean, it's a leap of faith on part of the, for once, basically, when the activists, when the opposition people tell you a scenario, perhaps it's about time to have a leap of faith. Because if you wanted for us to sort of show you a chart and draw you sort of a map and guarantee you things, it's not going to happen. Now that the only people who can do that are the regimes. And, they can show you a chart and give you a whole line of bull, whatever, so to convince you of their point of view. I'm not going to lie to you. We can tell you facts, we can tell you figures, but in the final analysis there is a leap of faith that's required. Had that leap of faith took place years ago, I think we would probably be in a better position to manage the situation right now. But the status quo in our part of the world is untenable. Be more proactive in managing the transitional period and supporting the forces on the ground who are calling for change and trying to lead the change, rather than giving so much effort to listening to government propaganda and people who are telling you the devil you know is far better. The devil you know is dead, and or at least is dying, and it's either going to bring down the entire house with him, or you're going to build an alternative and take part in building that alternative. And with this, I'd like to thank you very much. And if you have any more questions, there are a lot of other issues that will be covered by my colleagues, and we can cover them also in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ammar. Thank you, Kate Seeley and the Middle East Institute for having organized this event with tremendous forethought and agility, if not quite enough space for those of you standing at the back, but I'm delighted that so many of you came. In addition to the things that were mentioned about me in the introduction, I actually have recently started a publishing company called Just World Books, and my latest book is one about the Arab Spring. and it really goes into the roots in the destruction of rural livelihoods, of how a lot of that fomented the Arab Spring. There's a lot of material about Syria, Lebanon, other countries, but it is notable the degree to which all of these movements in Syria and elsewhere didn't start in the national capitals, not even in Egypt. They started in the provincial towns, in places where people uprooted by the destruction of rural livelihoods had gathered in small provincial towns, like Mohammed Bouazizi, obviously, in Tunis. Just a little bit of a plug there, justworldbooks.com. So, one thing that's interesting in this discussion and in most of the discussions about the Arab Spring is that actually Israel is not the center of these discussions. This is something new in discussions of the region. Obviously Israel is a big presence in the region, but I think we are coming to a more mature understanding now that the interests and concerns of the 100 million Arabs who live in the countries bordering Israel need to be given due weight along with those of Israel's 7.2 million people, and that we can no longer look at the whole region through an Israelocentric lens. Israel is, of course, only one of Syria's 5 neighbours, and I hope you all got the map. You can look at it just to remind yourself of who Syria's other neighbours are. The others are Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq, and Jordan. Of these, Turkey is the most powerful actor of those 4, and it has the longest common border with Syria. Other states and actors that are influenced by what happens in Syria are obviously Iran, the Palestinians, and the Gulf states in the region. And then beyond that, I'm leaving Steve to talk about anything sort of outside the Middle East.
Indeed.
Just about all these outside governmental actors thus far, including Israel, have concluded that abhorrent though the actions of the Syrian Ba'athist regime have been, it is still probably better to deal with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. And it's probably true that the substance of the regional and foreign policies of any now conceivable successor regime in Damascus would be very similar to those of the Ba'athist regime. It's not that the Ba'athist regime goes and the next day suddenly, you have some kind of crypto-Zionist, wonderful, let's all normalize with Israel regime comes into power. No, any conceivable, now foreseeable successor regime will have a foreign policy more or less the same as what the Ba'athists have been, with some changes in flavoring, obviously. If you get more influence of Syria's Sunni majority in decision-making, then you may have stronger support for Hamas, but less for Hezbollah, things like that, less for Iran. We can come back to that later. But perhaps on the key peace issues, these people, whether they are secular activists of the kind that I assume Ammar is generally in touch with, or whether they are the Brotherhood activists, so active and organized from Europe, will probably be just as hard-headed or more hard-headed on Israeli-Syrian peace issues as the Ba'athist government. And we've seen that in Egypt already, that the secularizers that everybody thought would be, so pro-Western and kind of go along with the idea of normalization with Israel. No, they're very active indeed in support of the Palestinians, in support of opening Gaza, and so on and so forth. The opposition movement in Syria has proven itself tough and resilient.